For nearly 2 centuries, the British ruled India. But they weren't just conquerors. They were more like accountants on a colossal scale. They basically turned the entire subcontinent into a revenue-generating machine. So the question is, how on earth did they pull that off?
I mean, really think about it. How does a trading company build an engine of extraction so powerful it can systematically drain the wealth from one of the richest places on Earth? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple, and it has almost nothing to do with looting palaces or stealing jewels, at least not in the way you might think.
Nope. The real treasure, the endless source of cash, was the land itself. You see, the British didn't just conquer India. They reorganized it. They measured every inch of it, and they taxed it with, frankly, ruthless efficiency.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with Britain's big picture strategy. Then we'll break down the 3 key systems they cooked up: the permanent settlement, the Rayatwari system, and the Mahalwari system. And then we'll get into the really tough part, the devastating impact all of this had on the Indian farmer. Okay, first things first, we need a little context. Before the British, India was overwhelmingly an agrarian economy. I mean, farming was what almost everyone did, and the land, well, the land was the primary source of all wealth and power. And the British, they understood this perfectly. They knew that if you control the land, you control the economy. So what did they do? They rolled out 3 totally different land revenue systems in different parts of India, each one designed as a tool for one thing and one thing only: systematic economic exploitation.
So let's kick things off with their first big experiment, the permanent settlement. The best way to think about this is like a strategic deal with the local landlords. They were basically outsourcing the messy job of collecting taxes.
This whole system was the brainchild of Lord Cornwallis, and he introduced it back in 1793, mostly in the Bengal region. Now, the key player here, the real linchpin of the whole operation, was a figure called the zamindar. So who exactly were these zamindars? Well, the British basically just declared them the legal owners of the land. It was their job to go collect taxes from the peasants who were actually farming that land and then pay a fixed, unchangeable amount back to the British East India Company. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Lord Cornwallis had this idea that he could create a loyal land-owning class, kind of like the aristocracy back in Britain. So he made the zamindars owners, and in return, he demanded a revenue that was fixed permanently. For the British, this was great. It meant a predictable, steady income, and they didn't have to deal with millions of individual farmers. But for the actual cultivators, it was a total disaster. They had 0 rights and were left completely at the mercy of the zamindar, who could charge them pretty much whatever he wanted. It didn't take long for the British to see the flaws in the permanent settlement. So in other parts of India, they decided to try something different. This was the Rayatwari system. And you can think of it as them just cutting out the middleman and trying to make a direct deal with the farmers themselves. This system came along around 1820, pioneered by Thomas Monroe and Captain Reed. And this time, the key player wasn't a landlord, but the Rayat.
And what's a Rayat? It's just the word for the cultivator, the peasant actually working the land. In this model, British officials themselves would come in, assess the land, and then fix the tax to be paid directly by that farmer. I mean, on the surface, that sounds a lot fairer, doesn't it? No more greedy landlords. But let's look a little closer at the details. Okay, so here is the crucial point, the tax rate. After they measured the land and estimated what it could produce, the government's demand was fixed at an absolutely staggering 45 to 50% of that produce. This wasn't just a high tax, it was a rigid, unbreakable rule. A single bad harvest, just one, could mean losing your land for good, because there was absolutely no flexibility in the system.
All right, the third and final system was a kind of hybrid of the other 2. It was called the Mahalwari system. And this was an approach where the British didn't deal with an individual landlord or an individual farmer, but with an entire village community. This one was developed by Holt Mackenzie and brought in around 1822, and the whole thing was built around the concept of the mahal. So a mahal was basically an estate, or more often, a whole village. The British would figure out the total revenue for the entire village, and the village community, usually through its headman, was jointly responsible for paying that tax. Think about that. If one farmer couldn't pay his share, the others had to step up and cover the difference. And this slide just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? Under the permanent settlement, it's the zamindar, the landlord, who pays. Under Rayatwari, it's the individual Rayat, the cultivator. And under Mahalwari, the entire village community is on the hook together. 3 different methods, sure, but all of them were roads leading to the exact same place, getting revenue into British hands.
So let's step back from the policies and the paperwork for a minute. What was the actual real-world result of these systems? What was the human cost for the millions of people living under this giant revenue machine? Well, the legacy was just devastating. For the first time, land became a commodity, something you could buy, sell, or have seized from you. To meet these crazy high tax demands, which the government insisted be paid in cash, peasants had no choice but to borrow from moneylenders. This kicked off a massive, inescapable cycle of debt, and millions ended up losing their land. This wasn't just a series of personal tragedies. It was the deliberate construction of systemic rural poverty that would haunt India for generations.
Just let that number sink in for a moment. 50%. The government could demand half of everything a farmer produced. It didn't matter if there was a drought, a flood, or a family tragedy. It was a completely unsustainable burden, and it was designed for one thing and one thing only: maximum extraction.
You know, one analysis of the time really sums up the tragic irony of it all. The legal system, which was supposed to bring order, instead became, and I'm quoting here, a curse to the society at the cost of the cultivators, effectively stripping them of their rights and their livelihoods. So, to come back to our original question, this is how they did it. In the end, it didn't really matter if the deal was with a landlord, a single farmer, or an entire village. The end result was a finely tuned machine that guaranteed a constant, systematic drain of wealth from the fields of India straight into the coffers of the British Empire. And that leaves us with one last really crucial question to think about. The British are long gone, of course, but the structures they put in place had incredibly long-lasting effects. So, how does this colonial legacy of land ownership, of debt, of displacement still echo in the challenges and realities of rural India even today?